Hi, my name's Rich Ford. I work for MPI, giving science advice there, and today I presented to the SWG on the ecological effects of aquaculture. The sort of take-homes from my messaging today was that at the moment the effects of aquaculture are relatively minor when you're looking at the whole New Zealand EEZ. When you're looking really coastally, inshore and some of those soft sediment habitats, then it becomes a more important issue, particularly things like seagrass beds and shallow soft sediment sort of systems. There you're talking about an impact that could impact on a number of species and take between 1 and 10 years to recover from. When you're thinking about the risks that could occur from aquaculture, a panel of people got together to assess these risks, and biosecurity came out top of the pile, largely because these risks can be widespread and they can have irreversible effects. After that, really pelagic effects and the effects of nitrogen in the system in terms of the impacts that could have in terms of phytoplankton blooms, and if things got really bad in terms of things like fish kills after that. And then things like marine mammal interactions and benthic interactions became important after that. When you're talking about aquaculture, there's really two different types of effects, particularly in the pelagic space. You're talking about fin fish farming where you're adding nutrients into the system, versus filter feeding when you're taking nutrients out largely. Benthic effects gets a lot of press in this sort of space, but largely those effects are quite localised, whereas the effects people are more worried about tend to be the larger scale pelagic effects. So really when you look across a whole range of effects, the things that sort of drop out as really useful in terms of considering the impacts of aquaculture are site selection. You want to put those things in those farms in the best places to minimise your ecological effects, having best management practices on the farms to deal with factors like escapees, biosecurity and potential entanglements of marine mammals, for example. And the fact is we're working in a marine system where our knowledge is not perfect. We're going to have to deal with uncertainty because we don't know how those are going to be, how some of those effects are going to be displayed, and therefore setting precautionary limits and adaptively managing over time to try and having responses that we know if we breach this response, there's some feedback loops and we can change our management style. That is really useful in this sort of space and in marine management generally when you're talking about natural resources. And you need to keep in mind that aquaculture risks don't occur in isolation. It's one part of the puzzle. There's also runoff from land, there's shipping with invasive species is something to be considered as well. There's a whole lot of processes going on. There's climate change, there's acidification, all those sorts of things, so we need to manage these things as coherently as we can together. And because of the push from the industry to expand the aquaculture industry, there's a lot of work going on in this space at the moment, particularly work that Waikato Regional Council is involved in terms of the best ways to spatially manage and the best ways to monitor some of these impacts. So it's a space to keep an eye out for in terms of how we can do things better over time. I don't think we've got to the point yet where we can say this is the best way to do things. We're still working on that, and so we need to have the flexibility to be able to adapt to the science and the better management practice as it comes along. It's not so much what I'd like to see, it's what I'd like to see being done. I'd like to see it being tried to manage more as a whole rather than a collection of disparate pieces. Because I see clashes between things like dairy farm runoff and aquaculture, and then there's a real balancing act between how much we value those and how much of each of those we allow. And at the moment that's being done on a largely historical basis, and I think we can join some of those dots up together better and manage it as a coherent whole a bit better.